Hello and welcome to the Health T-level recording on updates to the specification. My name is Tracy and I'm joined by Marina.
Hello.
And we are members of the Provider Development Team and we are here today to take you through the updates to the T-level Technical Qualification Health Specification. So just an overview of our agenda today. We will be going through the following in this session. So we will highlight the updated specification and where to find the summary of changes. We will highlight general updates such as key language changes and the scheme of assessment amendments to take into account new and updated content. We'll explore in further detail updates to sections A, B1 and B2 and give an overview of updates to year 2. We'll highlight updates to the resource list. It is important to note that all information is provided is correct at the present time, but may not reflect future changes to guidance. Be sure to check the latest documentation for the latest information. Firstly, we're going to outline the rationale for the updates and some general changes. So the rationale behind the updates is as follows. The heart of the updates was taking into account provider and student voice and how to best support health learners, ensuring that the health content is specific to health teams and their outcomes and goals. Section A was updated to give clarity, depth, and ensuring vocational currency, with some additional social care added where the expectation is this would be naturally occurring links to the health qualification vocation. Section B, core and further science concepts contextualised to health, and to ensure all depth of knowledge covered is relevant to health qualification. Finally, ensuring that the qualification framework and assessment is kept consistent with the current models. We will now play a short recording from Joanna Fairless, our Head of Assessment Design, who will spend a few minutes talking you through the changes to the core exams as a result of the updated specification content. She will cover amendments to the scheme of assessment in relation to Paper B assessment overview and content of Paper B assessment. Additionally, she will discuss approaches to resits.
Hello, my name is Joanna Fairless and I am NCFE's Head of Assessment Design. I'm going to spend a few moments today talking you through the changes to the core exams as a result of the new specification content. So starting with the impact of the new content changes. So the changes will only impact the core exams component of the T-level. There are no changes to the core skills content, which is assessed by the Employer Set project, and there are no changes to the occupational specialism content. Only core paper B has been redeveloped as a result of this change, and the paper structure has been amended to ensure alignment with the new content. The assessment will continue to be an exam paper and it will continue to be delivered in 2 assessment series each academic year. So moving on to the changes to the paper, it now has 3 sections: Body Systems 1, Body Systems 2 and Body Systems 3. Each section, A and B, will focus on a different set of body systems, and section 3 will sample from the entire content. Core science concepts such as cells, genetics, immunology will be assessed in the context of these body systems, and that allows students to apply their learning to the various body systems and allows us to target the content more effectively. The new version of the assessment paper will target the same 3 assessment objectives as in previous versions and as paper A does currently. So AO1 is the students demonstrate knowledge and understanding of context, concepts, theories and principles in healthcare. Number 2 is their ability to apply knowledge and understanding of these context, concepts, theories and principles to different situations and contexts. And AO3 is about students analysing and evaluating information and issues related to the contexts, concepts, theories and principles in healthcare, and then making informed judgments or drawing conclusions. The number of marks within the paper and the spread of the assessment objectives remain the same. So that covers the changes to the assessment papers, and new versions of the sample papers will be published on NCFE's website for you to log in and review. We now need to move on to the approach to resits. So the new specification will go live for registrations from September 2023. Assessments using the new specification will be available for the first sit from summer 2024. It is expected that students who have registered on the T-level prior to September 2023 will continue to resit assessments which are aligned to the original qualification specification. This is due to the scale of the changes in the new specification and the anticipated challenge in delivering new content to resitting students, alongside the delivery of Year 2 content and their industry placements. However, we want to understand your views on this approach once you've had the opportunity to read and understand the changes. We're aware that it may be that you feel the new spec is more appropriate for your students and you want them to have the opportunity to sit that specification. Therefore, we will be consulting to seek provider views on this approach. Please consider the new specification and the changes to the exam and consider your preferred approach, and look out for details on the consultation and upcoming communications from us. Thank you very much for your time. I'll now hand back to the provider development team.
So next in the amendments to the scheme of assessment are the grading descriptors, which have been updated to allow for a more direct link to the updated content. Here we have the descriptors for the A grade, with the previous version shown on the left and an updated version on the right. The descriptors with changes are shown in the boxes. The third descriptor in the box has moved higher up. The other two descriptors have been removed and two new ones have been added. We see mirrored changes in the descriptors for the E grade. If you currently use descriptors to measure student progress, it is important to incorporate these updates in your delivery. The final amendments to the scheme of assessment is the grading matrix. So the grading matrices have been updated to reflect changes from the DFE. You will see there are now the two passes have been changed to merit, and one merit is now a distinction. The updated version of the specification has also updated core skills mapping to the general competency framework. Here we have an example for some of the general math competencies, highlighting the more specific opportunities to demonstrate those maths and English skills in assessment. For full details, see the general competency framework table in the specification. Additionally, there is now an updated list of progression opportunities, which you can see on the right. This aligns with the updated content area in A2.12, which we'll look at in more detail. These progression updates align with the new IFE occupational maps. You can use these interactive maps with your students to understand the progression routes. To reflect the changes in Core B, there are two new sample assessment papers and corresponding mark schemes available on the NCFE website. These will give you opportunity to experience the new structure and use with your students for mock exams.
We're now going to explore the updates to Core A in more detail. We would firstly like to highlight how to use the specification. The bold statement is the topic, and the bullet points indicate the depth to which you must deliver the content. More detail has been added throughout the specification to assist with depth. An understanding of how specification is structured will support in understanding the amendments and their impact on your curriculum planning. As seen in the changes at the end of the specification, there have been several different types of amendments. We're using these as criteria in the following summary of Section 8 updates, which we will contextualise with examples. When reviewing the changes at the end of the specification, this should support you in identifying what this would look like in the content areas of the specification. Throughout the specification, legislation has been reviewed. This is to ensure it adheres to current practices. As seen here in A3.1, two pieces of legislation have been updated, including the Personal Protective Equipment at Work regulations and the Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment regulations. For the criteria of wording has been updated. In this example of A9.4, you can see that the wording from the previous version at the top to the updated version at the bottom, and the new wording offers clarity on the bullet point. For the criteria of updated with additional content, this example of A2.12, you can see here that there has been additional content added to give examples of health settings for a senior support worker. This gives more depth to the content and clarity on what is to be covered in teaching and delivery. In some changes, more than one criteria can apply to a content area. In this example from A2.1, wording has been updated and additional content has been added. Here, social care services and examples have been added, highlighting where naturally occurring social care content has been considered in the updated specification. This naturally occurring link to social care has been added here in A9.8, where an additional example of health and social care has been added. In the criteria, in some instances, content has been removed. In this example from A8.17, 2 bullet points have been removed. Some content removed allows for refinement in the depth of the content, so it aligns more clearly with and specifically to the content areas. In this instance, the concept of safeguarding in relation to providing person-centered care. To summarise, more detail has been added throughout the specification to assist with depth of knowledge. More clarity has been provided to support teaching and delivery. There have been more naturally occurring links to social care added. When reviewing the rest of the specification changes as highlighted throughout this recording, please use this as a guide to support you in picking out how these changes might look on the specification, using this to support you in any changes you may need to make in relation to your teaching and delivery.
We will now provide an overview of the changes to the B1 section. Section B1 has seen some of the most extensive changes in this update, and there involves a large proportion of new content. So the rationale for Section B1 update is, unlike Section A, there are extensive changes. This section update should be reviewed as a whole. For B1 and B2, the updates will most likely have the highest impact on your curriculum planning and design. Therefore, we are going to review the content area for B1 and B2 as if approaching the specification for the first time. This should highlight both what has significantly changed and allow you to start thinking about how this will impact your teaching and delivery. So to begin with, as a reminder, this was the previous structure for B1 core science concepts in the health T level. B1 was split into 3 unequal sections with the bias towards biology. We will now review the changes to this, and you should hopefully now see how we have made B1 relevant to a health qualification and at the level and rigour expected of a level 3 health qualification. I will now give you an overview of the content of B1. This section, you will see some similarities to the previous version of the specification. However, there are significant changes even to these sections to give it more depth and specificity. So starting at B1.1, we have cells, which covers cell theory, different types of cells and structure and function of organelles, structure and function of specialized cells in complex multicellular organisms, and role of the light microscope in observing cells. Next, we have cell cycle, including function and process of mitosis within cells, the purpose of each stage. We have large molecules, exploring protein, carbohydrates, lipids. Next, we have enzymes, which explores the properties and the role of the enzymes. Additionally, we have exchange and transport mechanisms, which include factors affecting the rate of exchange in specialized systems, structure of the cell surface membrane, and mechanisms of cellular exchange and transport. Finally, for this section, we have genetics, which includes purpose of DNA and RNA, the structure of DNA and RNA relating to their role with inheritance. Let's review an example. As mentioned previously in this part of B1 content area, you will see some similarities to the previous version of the specification. However, there are significant changes even to sections you are familiar with. This is the previous version of B1.3. As you can see in the updated version, there has been more clarity on the depth and the removal of plant organelles. Plants on the whole has been removed from the updated spec, with only a reference to 1.2 to describe different types of eukaryotic cells, highlighting this shift in focus of science concepts linking more specifically to health. Therefore, please review all of B1 furtherly, as even when content is similar, there are differences which will need to be incorporated into your curriculum planning. Let's look at the content of B1 further contextualized examples. Immunology has had significant changes from the previous specification. In immunology, you will explore characteristics of key microorganisms, definitions and types of pathogens, including common types of conditions or diseases, different modes of pathogen transmission, how infectious disease spread amongst population and communities, definition of antigen and antibody with links between antigens and the initiations of the body responses, specific and non-specific defense mechanisms, including cell-mediated and antibody-mediated immunity, and the role of the T and B memory cells, and how the body reacts to injury and trauma, with the role and consideration of using MRI scanning. Let's look at an example. So an example in exploring and comparing pathogens in the previous and updated specification. In this example, B1.25 from the previous spec, you have causative agent with examples of resulting diseases. And the updated specification, they have made the language more student-friendly, clearer and more understandable. It is now under B1.15, and you can see clearly through the use of the table that the wording of example has been removed. The expectation is that these conditions or diseases must be discussed in relation to the pathogens, removing ambiguity. This is just one example of changes to immunology in the updated specification. Please review this content thoroughly to ensure you capture all changes to support your curriculum planning. Next, we have epidemiology and health promotion, which has been moved from B2 to B1. The areas covered are the meaning of epidemiology, including definitions of specific terminology that is used, how epidemiology is used, and how health promotion helps to prevent the spread and control of disease and disorder. This section has the same 3 headings as the previous specification. Content for content area 2, how epidemiology is used, and content area 3, how health promotion helps, is also the same in the updated specification. Where it differs is in content area 1, the meaning of epidemiology. Again, as you can see, we've removed ambiguity and included a 3rd level where clearly we see the specific terminology defined. This was not on the previous specification. Next, we have homeostasis and physiological measurements. In this, we explore the principle of homeostasis and how this links to maintaining the functions within physiological systems. Homeostasis content has been reduced and moved from B2 with the key underpinning knowledge in B1 with further content development in relation to hormones in B2. This is an example of how B1 supports those further science concepts in health. Next, we have normal ranges of physiological measurements and the factors which may affect these measurements. This has also been moved from B2 and has been reduced with the removal of how to identify physiological measurements that fall outside of the normal range, how physiological perimeters are routinely measured, including the equipment used. This further content, which was in the original specification, is still covered in year 2, but is not necessary in year 1 to support those further science concepts. Next, we're going to explore classification of diseases and disorders. This has been moved from B2, and different classifications and their purposes has been removed from the content. As B2 explores body systems in more detail, therefore in B1 science concepts, commonly used classification systems of disease and disorders have been kept, as this will give the students the underpinning knowledge to support B2 content. Next, we're going to look at particles in radiation. So in the updated specs, we have types and properties of ionizing radiation and definition of half-life. This is all that has been kept from the original specification in relation to physics content. These scientific concepts will help support B2 in relation to areas such as cancer and cancer treatment. Finally, units are still in the updated specification. The previous specification had the use of the international systems of units and how to convert between units. The updated version, the use of the international system of units are only still in place, which are relevant to health. How to convert units have been expanded to include more conversions relevant to health, and the importance of using significant figures and science notation has not changed. So to summarise, there have been extensive changes. This section updates should be reviewed as a whole. The updates on B1 will most likely have the highest impact on your curriculum planning and design. Where there are topic titles, so the bold statement in the specification, to the previous version of the specification, there are still significant changes to provide more depth and specificity, as well as removal of content that may be ambiguous. These scientific concepts will help support B2 in relation to body systems, diseases, cancer, and cancer treatment. Therefore, please review all of B1, as even when content appears similar, there are differences which will need to be incorporated into your curriculum planning.
Now moving on to B2, which is some significant structural amendments. The rationale for these amendments are to create a section that followed the same structure throughout to aid with delivery and assessment, to provide clear health contexts for challenging science concepts, as well as clear linkage between the core concepts from B1 to health contexts, which in turn allows for revisiting the core concepts throughout B2, and to ensure that all depth of knowledge covered is relevant to the health qualification. B2 now has several sections centred on a particular body system. All the body system sections have identical structure. So this includes structure and function of the body system, a scientific concept linked to that body system to provide context, and then 1 or 2 disorders or diseases linked to that body system, which covers causes of the disease or disorder, impacts on physical and mental health, and common treatments. Common treatments are reviewed each year during our annual review to ensure that the treatments remain up to date. Additionally, there is now a section on cancer that doesn't follow this structure. We will explore the structure of that content related to cancer later. On the original specification, 9 body systems were covered. Specifically, the components of the system, where they're located, their function and structure, including how they are organised. These 9 systems still appear in the updated specification, but now follow the structure highlighted previously. This means there will be more detailed content on systems than in the previous specification. This content was originally in B2, but has now moved to B1. Changes to those content areas were discussed earlier. Generally, there were refined and more clarity provided, with the purpose of bringing underpinning scientific concepts to support the structure of the updated B2 content. Additionally, in the previous version of the specification in B2, diseases were given as examples in brackets. To remove the ambiguity, as previously mentioned, diseases are clearly defined and linked to the relevant body systems. Let's now look at the body systems in more detail. Here is an overview of the 9 body systems that are still covered in B2. Under each is a scientific concept linked to that body system and the diseases. We're now going to go through an example. Here you can see how the cardiovascular system appeared in the old specification. Here is the updated cardiovascular system. We can see that the content includes the role of components in the cardiovascular system, including blood vessels and the mammalian heart. This is similar to the previous version of the specification with more detail around the mammalian heart. The function, which has changed from the previous version. The cardiac cycle. So this is the scientific concept linked to the body system for context. And then development, impact and management of coronary heart disease. Let's look at one more example. Here you can see how the renal system appeared in the previous version of the specification. Here is the updated renal system. We can see that the content includes the role of components in the renal system, including kidney and nephrons. Similar to the previous specification, however, the updated version, nephron has been expanded to provide clearer indication of depth. The function, which has changed from the previous version of the specification, as homeostasis is now a core scientific concept, and the role of osmoregulation. Expanded are the mechanisms of osmoregulation as a scientific concept linked to that body system for context. And the disease is the development, impact and management of chronic kidney disease. You can clearly see in this example that there are similar components in the updated specification to previous. However, there are changes to take into account when curriculum planning. The new assessment structure is centred around these body systems. The musculoskeletal, cardiovascular, respiratory and nervous systems are assessed in Section A of Paper B. The rest are assessed in Section B. Any can appear in Section C, as well as cancer can be assessed in any section, but should be used in combination with any of the content within that section where possible and relevant, in order to assess the depth of understanding. Here we have this new content area in B2 of cancer. This links with B1 on the cell cycle. Content includes the difference between benign and malignant tumours, 5 different types of cancer, including common treatments. These are often involving different body systems. So invasive breast cancer, thyroid cancer, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, acute myeloid leukemia, and germ cell testicular cancer, as well as covering causes, impact on body systems, and physical and mental health. So you can see here the difference between benign and malignant tumours, 5 different types of cancer, causes, which is here where it links to B1, the cell cycle, and impact on body systems and physical and mental health. To summarise, there have been extensive changes to B2. The updates in this section should be reviewed as a whole. Like B1, B2 updates will most likely have a significant impact on your curriculum planning and design. So where the topic titles, which is that bold statement in the specification, is the same or similar to the previous version of the specification, there are still significant changes to provide more depth and specificity, as well as the removal of content that may be ambiguous. Some content that was previously in B2 has now moved to B1. Changes to the content areas were discussed earlier, but generally these sections were refined and clarity was given with the purpose of bringing underpinning scientific concepts to support the structure of the updated B2 content. There's now clearly defined content structure for body systems, and this is to support in planning. With these changes, please review all of B2, as even when content is similar, there are differences which will need to be incorporated in your curriculum planning.
That was the overview of Year 1, where you will find the vast majority of amendments. We will now detail the updates to the occupational specialism content. Similar to Section A, the occupational specialisms have been updated to provide clarity, depth, and ensuring vocational currency. Using the specification changes summaries as a basis for the criteria, we're going to explore the updates to the Year 2 content. The criteria of wording has been updated, examples removed, some content removed, all bullet points updated, and resources added or removed will be contextualised to supporting healthcare core, adult nursing, supporting midwifery team, supporting mental health team, and supporting care of children and young people. As you will note, there are no updates to supporting therapy teams in this year's annual review. As in Section A, we will use some examples to contextualise the changes, but again, this will not cover all updates. Please use this to support you in your understanding by using a list of changes to identify how and where changes have been made in the content. For this example, we will show the previous version on the left and the updated version on the right. So in regards to wording updated and example removed, in this example of K3.14 of the Support and Healthcare Core, we can see some wording has been updated where GDPR is now data protection. The examples in the safeguarding bullet points have been removed. Moving on to adult nursing, another example of where wording can be updated in regards to S2.17. In this instance, you can see it is changing part of the content criteria and it's being more explicit in that connection to those underpinning skills. In this further example for supporting adult nursing teams, the final bullet point of S3.7 has been updated to provide more clarity to support you in your teaching and delivery. For the criteria of some content removed, in this example from supporting the midwifery team, the skill of assisting with urethral catheterization has been removed, as it was felt that it lacked relevance and realistic expectation to the current level 3 vocational skills of students. And unless they were specifically trained, they wouldn't perform catheterization. Next, in the criteria of all bullet points updated, you will see that these sections have more significant changes, such as S3.12 of supporting the mental health team. Specifically, examples of poor well-being have been removed. These were lacking in accuracy as they were examples of mental health conditions rather than poor mental well-being. This amendment is allowing for more concise content with a shift in focus on mental well-being on the updated content for supporting mental health. In this example of S1.17 from supporting the care of children and young people, in regards to wording has been updated. This is the end of the summary on some of the updates to content area for year 2. As highlighted previous, when reviewing the rest of the specification changes, as highlighted throughout today, please use this as a guide to support you in picking out how these changes might look on the specification. Using this to support you in your changes you may need to do in relation to your teaching and delivery. So to summarise, the occupational specialism has been updated to provide clarity, depth and to ensure vocational currency. More instances and connections to those underpinning skills have been provided. Updated content to ensure relevance and realistic expectation of level 3 T-level students. It has become more concise and accurate in its content. When reviewing the rest of the specification, as mentioned earlier, please use this recording as a guide to support you in identifying how this might look and really using this in relation to what you need to now include in your teaching and delivery.
Now moving on to the resource requirements. The updated specification provides additional clarity with resource requirements. This screenshot here states that students must have access to all equipment on the list. This could either mean through loan to the provider or in partnership with an external organisation such as a university. However, all equipment on the list could be required for use in an assessment. The provider guide for each assessment series will give a complete list of the required equipment for that assessment. It's important to note that the resource lists in the specification are not exhaustive. You may feel additional equipment is required to deliver the knowledge and skills depending on your student's need and your provider setting. For the OS core, there have been no resources removed. There have been several resources added and detail around dipstick testing equipment include specifying the dipstick equipment can test glucose, ketones, proteins, pH, white blood cells, and red blood cells. There's also been the addition of bed and bed sheets, transfer belt and transfer board, peak flow monitor, resources to maintain privacy and dignity, and specimen tubes and labels. For supporting the adult nursing team occupational specialism, the must has been removed and bed sheets and specimen collection equipment has been added. For midwifery, there are no resources removed, and there are some that have been added. Sterilisation equipment, identification bracelets and bed sheets. There's also been more detail provided for the thermometer. You must have thermometers that can measure temperature in air, water and body. For supporting the mental health team, voice output communication aids have been removed and no additional resources have been added. For supporting the therapy teams, has the removal of voice output communication aids and the addition of several resources, including bed sheets, range of art equipment and musical instruments, a wheelchair, communication aids, toileting equipment, walking support rails, and the ability or resource to alter screen colour. There's a summary of updates to the health specification. There have been changes to the scheme of assessment. More detail has been added throughout the specification to assist with depth. There's been more clarity provided to support teaching and delivery. There have been more naturally occurring links to social care added. Content has been updated to ensure a higher vocational currency and accuracy. Content has been amended to ensure its relevance and realism. There have been extensive changes to B1 and B2. Some B2 content has now moved to B1. B2 has a clearly defined content structure. There are now clear links with B1 science concepts supporting B2. These changes in B1 and B2 will have a significant impact on your curriculum planning. There have been updates to occupational specialism resource requirements. You will need to be systematic in your review of the changes to this specification. Use our contextualized examples in this video to support you in identifying clearly what changes look like in the content areas of the specification. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.